That when you've figured out what you want in life, in other words, your vision and your goals, you can then use your dark side to get it. In other words, you can use the power of the dark side. You can harness the power of the dark side to help you get to where you want to be in life and enjoy the process of doing so, and therefore live a happy and fulfilled life. And when it comes to using your dark side to get what you want from life, this may come in the form of your why. In other words, a powerful reason or reasons for wanting to achieve a particular goal or vision. Because very often your dark side is linked to your reasons why you want to do things. Sometimes your reasons, your powerful reasons that get you fired up and motivated to achieve things, is very often linked to your dark side. Sometimes it is your dark side. And as the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And what he's saying there is that if you've got a powerful enough reason to achieve a goal or anything, you will always eventually find a way to achieve that goal. You'll be able to put up with incredible adversity. You'll be able to overcome unbelievable challenges. You'll go through anything and sacrifice anything in order to achieve that goal if you have a big enough why. Those with children will understand this, that children can be a very powerful why. If a child's life is in danger, a parent will do anything, and I mean anything, to save that child's life. And that's a good example of having a powerful why. But the point I'm making here is very often your reason or reasons for wanting to do things in life, your meaning and purpose even, can be very much linked to your dark side. And so this is an example of using and channeling your dark side in a positive way by using it to create self-motivation to drive you to what you want to achieve in life, to overcome challenges, obstacles, adversity, and sacrifice things to get to where you want to be, but also to do so in a way that you're going to enjoy. So sometimes your why, or part of your why, might come in the form of an emotion that would power you to victory. And a couple of examples of how emotions can sometimes form part of your dark side and how you can use them and harness those emotions include things like, let's say somebody calls you fat. Now that might hurt your feelings, but if it's true, you can use that anger that you might feel to help you lose weight. So many people do this. So many people use this adversity and emotions that they might feel to power them to great things. So in this example, which yes is a bit of a random example, but in this example, if somebody does call you fat and if it does hurt your feelings and you feel angry, you can actually use that and control that anger and channel it into actually losing weight. You can channel it and use it as motivation to actually eat better and exercise more and lose weight. Because in your head, you might want to wipe the smile off that person's face. Now obviously uncontrolled anger like rage and hatred, that does more harm than good. So we're not talking about uncontrolled anger or uncontrolled emotions, we're talking about controlled anger, which is actually a calm but focused state of wanting to prove that person wrong. And of course, prove yourself right by achieving your goal. Another example of using an emotion to power you to victory would be, let's say in university, a friend laughs when you say you want to be an entrepreneur and simply says sarcastically, "Good luck with that." Again, you can use that as motivation. I know people who've done this. They've been in university and everyone's been saying what they want to do for a living, and some of their friends might be talking about how they're going to get this high-powered job and go onto this graduate scheme and get a company car. And then you might say, "Well, I want to be an entrepreneur." And they might just laugh at you. And then somebody says, "Oh, good luck with that." People use that kind of thing for motivation. Because as we know, being an entrepreneur is hard. And so when that person might fail in their third business, that motivation, that thought of the friend laughing at them and of saying to them, "Good luck with that," in that sarcastic voice, they can use that as motivation to carry on, to persist, and to continue until they succeed. They might not know that friend anymore. That friend might be a distant memory, but in their mind, they want to wipe the smile off their friend's face. They want to drive up in their Lamborghini when they've made millions as an entrepreneur and prove them wrong, even if it's just in their own mind. But the real point is you can use emotions not in negative ways, but in positive ways to power you to greatness. As I've hopefully drilled home to you in this section, when you acknowledge and control your dark side, you're going to be happier in life because you're tapping into the rawest and purest version of who and what you are. And when I talk about this thing, I often think of a lion in a zoo versus a lion in the wild. Because when we picture a lion in the zoo, we all know it's different to a lion running around in the wild. A lion in the wild runs around, it'll kill things, it'll kill to eat, and it's not being bad, it's just being a lion. It's just being itself. But when a lion's in a zoo, it's in this enclosure or it's locked up in this cage, and what does it do? It just walks around slowly and lethargically. It doesn't go around killing anything, and it's lost its natural instincts. It doesn't run around as much, it just becomes tame and subdued. And it's a good analogy for how we live our lives in society. We bury our dark side, we lose sight of who we really are, and instead of being locked in an enclosure or a cage, we build our own metaphorical enclosures and cages in the form of other people's opinions. So instead of being locked in by a cage or an enclosure, we get locked in by societal norms, by the expectations of other people, by the expectations, judgments and opinions of friends, parents, colleagues, and we end up living other people's lives instead of being true to who we are. We live a life where we're subdued. We live a normal life of mediocre happiness. We settle. We abide by societal norms. We fit in instead of being who we are. Instead of being the lion running around in the wild, we live our lives like the lion locked in a cage in the zoo. And we get locked in by all these societal norms. And I'm not talking about laws here, by the way. We all have to obey laws of the land. That's completely different. I'm talking about the unwritten rules, which almost acts like a script, where we feel like we have to live our life in a certain way, according to other people's expectations, according to societal expectations and societal norms. And so we do things that we don't want to do, and we also don't do things that we do want to do because of all these judgments and opinions and expectations from other people and society in general. And of course, even our own insecurities can sometimes act as a cage that we lock ourselves in. And so when we use and acknowledge and embrace and control our dark side, we live our lives more like the lion in the wild. In other words, we're true to ourselves. And we don't just fit in for the sake of fitting in, we live our lives how we want to live them. Yes, within the realms of the laws, but other than obeying laws, we do what we want. We live our lives in a way that's going to make us happy and fulfilled. We're not constrained by other people's opinions, by society's expectations, by your parents' expectations, or by societal norms. We come alive and live the lives that we want to live. And so when you use and control your dark side, you will feel most alive. And that breeds happiness. You will feel in the zone or flow of life more often, and we all know how good that feels when time flies. And some other simple but very powerful suggestions in terms of how to harness and use the dark side in the right way include: do activities that feed part of your dark side, but control them before such pleasurable activities become dangerous. For example, if your dark side involves you being competitive and you have this unbelievable competitive streak, you can feed that part of your dark side by, for example, playing tennis or running marathons like I used to do. But if you don't control that part of your dark side, if you don't control that competitiveness, it could lead you to, for example, gambling to try and get rich quick. Or instead of enjoying a glass of red wine every now and then as part of a pleasurable activity with your spouse, you become an alcoholic because you don't control it. So do activities that feed part of your dark side, whatever it may be, but control them before such pleasurable activities become dangerous. Also bear in mind that there are positive and negative ways to feed your dark side, and so intentionally choose the positive ways. So to give you an example of this, let's say your dark side involves you being aggressive. Well, a positive way to feed your dark side in that respect would be to take up martial arts or boxing. Channel it in that positive way, instead of going to the pub and getting involved in a brawl or a punch-up. That would obviously be a negative way of channeling your aggression. And boxers are actually a good example of those people who have dark sides and control them in order to have a happy and successful life, when very often they would otherwise be delinquents or in jail. Many boxers even openly talk about the fact that if it wasn't for boxing, they probably would be in jail. And yes, some boxers might still struggle with parts of their life and might still struggle to control their dark side, but the fact is, without boxing, they would be far worse than they are. They would be in a far worse position in life than they actually are. But the vast majority of boxers live happy and successful lives, are certainly much more happy and much more successful than they would otherwise be, because they've channeled their dark side in a positive way rather than just getting into trouble. Another way to harness and control the dark side in a positive way is to create positive addictions and positive habits in your life. Because we all have addictions, so why not intentionally choose to create positive addictions and positive habits in your life? So instead of becoming addicted to gambling or alcohol or drugs, become addicted to exercise, become addicted to helping others, become addicted to building good habits in your life. And finally, as we've discussed, you can use your dark side to tap into your whys for achieving things. In other words, use your dark side to tap into the reasons for wanting to achieve things. We're going to finish off this lecture and indeed this section with a case study, mainly to reinforce a lot of the points I've already made to make sure that you properly understand them. And one aspect of my dark side that I don't mind sharing with you is my competitiveness. And this is part of my dark side because few people know just how competitive I am. In other words, I'm almost secretly competitive because very few people who know me know just how competitive I really am. And just a few weeks ago, I was talking to my boss and I did admit to him that I was quite competitive. And he was really surprised. He just didn't see it in me. He didn't see it coming. Why? It's because I keep it, or at least have kept it until now, in the dark. And my competitiveness was a part of my dark side that drove me to the pinnacles of my life, those incredible achievements and successes. And it's also driven me to where I am now, in terms of the happiness and fulfillment and success that I have in my life right now. But it was the same part of my dark side that drove me to my lowest point of my life when I was sleeping in my car and £70,000 in debt. And the only difference is that during my lowest point of my life, my dark side was controlling me, whereas now I'm controlling my dark side. And another thing that can happen when I don't control my competitiveness is too much focus on my competition. And to give you an example of that, from a few years ago in my work, I had a colleague that used to do really well, and I was always a little bit jealous. And I was constantly focusing on him, and I was trying to copy him, and I was comparing myself to him. And of course, we all know that comparing yourself to others is a fast track to misery. One of my favourite quotes about that is the fact that comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. When you're always comparing yourself to other people, you're never going to be happy. You should always try and focus on yourself. Yes, you can learn from people and you should look at what your competitors are doing. There's nothing wrong with that. But you shouldn't be obsessively comparing yourself to your competition or indeed other people in general. And by focusing too much on this particular person, it led to me being reactive rather than being proactive. I was reacting to everything that he was doing rather than being proactive and focusing on myself and focusing on trying to make myself and my team better. I was constantly looking at him. And focusing on and obsessively studying the competition can lead to a stifling lack of creativity because you end up just copying what they're doing. And that's what I ended up doing. Instead of becoming creative and focusing on myself and my own team and therefore coming up with my own ideas in terms of how to get better as a manager, as a leader, and how I could help make my team become better, I was constantly focusing on what he was doing and just copying him basically. And so I was always playing catch up, hanging on to his coattails. And the reality is, he constantly kept getting better results because I was just playing catch up. And when I actually turned it on its head and started being more proactive and focusing on myself and making myself better as a manager and leader and thinking for myself in terms of what I can do to help my team get better, I actually started to get better results then and actually started to compete with him and his team then. Another thing that can happen with my competitiveness when it's not controlled is a severe lack of patience through the uncontrolled urge to try and beat everyone now instead of playing the long game. And this was never more obvious in my own life than through my trading and investing activities that led to me gambling everything away. Because if you remember, I started off trading and investing in a very controlled, disciplined way, but then my competitiveness took over and it started to control me. And that manifested itself in terms of me, in my own head, wanting to beat everyone now instead of playing the long game. And because I wanted to beat everyone now, in my mind, the only way I could do that was to make loads of money really quickly. And so I was very impatient. And so I started to take on more and more risk because I was wanting to make money even quicker. And that culminated, as you know, in me gambling, literally gambling on the markets because I was just trying to get rich quick. And that actually eventually destroyed my life. And that's because ultimately my competitiveness was not controlled. And so my uncontrolled competitiveness led to impatience, which led to stupid short-term decisions, which led to horrific longer-term results. So nowadays I instead harness my competitiveness, in other words I control it, by focusing on being the best I can be. In other words, my biggest competitor now is myself. It's the person I was yesterday. So make your greatest competitor you, and you are simply increasing your chances of happiness and are less likely to compare yourself to others. Don't get me wrong, I do harness the thoughts and emotions of beating other people in order to create that burning desire and intense motivation to win, but I then channel that energy into focusing on what I can control, which is myself and what I can do and how I can get better, instead of focusing on other people all the time. And it's much better to do this rather than expending all your energy on just focusing on the competition and therefore playing catch up with them all the time or making stupid short-term decisions to try and beat them in the moment, to try and beat them now. And as a quick side note, this also allowed me to tap into one of my own values as well, which of course is self-improvement, and that for me helped build further happiness. I'd like to finish off this lecture and indeed this section with a quote and then a recommended read for you. So first of all, the quote: "If you continuously compete with others, you become bitter. But if you continuously compete with yourself, you become better." In terms of a recommended read,